After years of being the family scapegoat, I finally cut ties. Now they're furious that I inherited Grandma's fortune and refused to share a dime. I always knew I was the family scapegoat. You'd think that after years of being blamed for everything, from my sister's bad grades to my brother's trouble with the law, I would have developed thicker skin. But no matter how much I tried to shrug it off, the sting never fully went away. It didn't matter what I did. I was always the one in the wrong, the black sheep, the outsider. But there was one person who always saw through the nonsense, my grandmother. Grandma was the only one who ever took my side, and she did it quietly, with a knowing smile and a reassuring pat on the back. While my parents lectured me on how I was a disappointment, or my siblings threw tantrums because I didn't do exactly what they wanted, Grandma would pull me aside and tell me stories about her life, how she had to fight to be heard, to be respected. She understood what it felt like to be the underdog. Before I continue, please remember to hit the like button, write a comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. Now let me get back to it. When Grandma passed away last year, it felt like the last piece of my armour had been stripped away. I was lost, adrift in a sea of grief that I didn't know how to navigate. My parents were too busy planning an extravagant funeral to notice how devastated I was, and my siblings were more concerned about whether they'd get any of Grandma's jewellery or antiques. At the reading of the will, I was prepared to be disappointed. My parents had always been close to Grandma, at least that's what they claimed, so I assumed they'd get the lion's share of her estate. I expected to receive some token item, maybe one of the books we used to read together or a piece of costume jewellery. But when the lawyer read out that Grandma had left everything to me, I was stunned. Everything. Not just the house, but the savings, the investments, the whole lot. I couldn't believe it. My parents looked like they had been slapped, and my siblings immediately started whispering to each other, their faces twisted in confusion and anger. I half expected someone to shout that there had been a mistake, that the lawyer had read the wrong will. But no one did. Instead, they just stared at me, a mixture of shock and resentment in their eyes. The lawyer handed me a letter, written in Grandma's delicate handwriting. I opened it, and as I read the first few lines, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. She had known, all along, she had known how they treated me, how they belittled me, how they used me as their emotional punching bag. She had seen it all, and this was her way of making things right. "I'm giving this to you because you deserve it, my dear," she wrote. "You've always been stronger than they ever realized, and now you'll have the means to build a life free from their cruelty. Use it well, and don't let them take it from you." That last line was prophetic. It didn't take long for my family to react. Within hours, I was bombarded with calls, texts, and emails from my parents and siblings. The messages ranged from polite inquiries about how I planned to share the inheritance to outright demands that I hand over what they considered their rightful share. My mother even had the gall to tell me that Grandma had obviously been senile when she wrote the will, and that the decent thing to do would be to split everything evenly. I was torn. On the one hand, this was my family. Despite everything, I'd always hoped for some kind of reconciliation, some acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused me. But on the other hand, Grandma's words echoed in my mind. They had always taken from me, and this was my chance to finally have something for myself. For the first time in my life, I decided to stand up to them. I told them no. No, I wasn't going to share the inheritance. No, I wasn't going to let them guilt-trip me into giving up what Grandma had intended for me. And no, I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. That's when things got ugly. When I told my family I wasn't going to share the inheritance, I braced myself for backlash. But nothing could have prepared me for the storm that followed. My mother was the first to lash out. She called me, voice shaking with a mix of rage and desperation, insisting that Grandma had made a mistake. "You know she wasn't in her right mind toward the end," she said, her tone dripping with venom. "She would have never wanted to cut the rest of us out like this." I kept my voice as steady as I could. "Mum, Grandma was completely lucid when she wrote that will. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she did this for a reason." "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "We're your family. You have a responsibility to us. You can't just keep it all for yourself. That's not how things work." I felt my resolve waver for a moment, But then I remembered all the years of being treated like the family's dumping ground for their frustrations, all the times I had been made to feel like less than nothing. "No, Mum," I said, my voice firmer now. "This is exactly how things are going to work. I'm keeping what Grandma left me. End of discussion." She hung up on me. The silence didn't last long. Within the hour, my brother called. Unlike Mum, he didn't bother with any pretense of civility. "You're a greedy little bitch, you know that," he spat as soon as I answered. "Do you really think you deserve all of that money? You've done nothing but coast through life. And now you think you can just sit back and live off Grandma's money while the rest of us struggle." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I'm not coasting, and I'm not living off anyone's money. I've worked hard my entire life." "Oh, give me a break," he interrupted. "You've always been the selfish one, always thinking you're better than us. But here's a reality check. You're not. You've never been anything but a burden, and now you're proving it by keeping what doesn't belong to you." I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. "You really think this doesn't belong to me? Grandma made it very clear that she wanted me to have this. I'm not going to apologize for that." "Well, you'll regret it," he hissed. "Just wait. You'll regret this more than you can imagine." The threats didn't stop there. My sister was next, though she took a different approach. She tried to play the sympathy card, calling me in tears, telling me how much she needed the money to help pay off her student loans, how hard things had been for her since she had her third kid. "You have to understand," she sobbed. "I'm not asking for everything, just enough to get by. We're family. We're supposed to look out for each other." I knew better than to fall for her act. She had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, even when she messed up spectacularly. I had spent my entire life watching her get everything handed to her on a silver platter, while I was left to fend for myself. And now she expected me to just hand over the one thing that had ever been given to me. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that," I said, trying to sound as gentle as possible. "This money is what Grandma wanted me to have. I'm not going to go against her wishes." "But I'm your sister," she cried. "How can you be so heartless?" It was incredible, really, how quickly the tears dried up when she realized I wasn't going to cave. Her voice turned icy. "You know, you're going to end up alone if you keep this up. No one's going to want anything to do with you. Is that really what you want? To die alone with all that money, with no one to care about you?" The words stung, but I didn't let her hear that. "I'd rather be alone than keep letting you all walk all over me," I said, before ending the call. The messages kept coming after that, each one more desperate and angry than the last. My father sent me a long email detailing all the sacrifices he'd made for me over the years, implying that I owed him, and the rest of the family, everything I had. He even suggested that if I didn't share the inheritance, I would be cut out of the family entirely, as if that was supposed to scare me. By the end of the week, I was emotionally drained. I had never felt more isolated, but at the same time there was a strange sense of relief in standing my ground. For once, I wasn't the one compromising, the one giving in just to keep the peace. I was taking care of myself, just like Grandma had wanted. But my family wasn't done with me yet. The real nightmare was just beginning. A few days later, I got a call from my family's lawyer. My parents had decided to contest the will. I knew they were angry, but I never imagined they'd go this far. Contesting Grandma's will? It was a move so desperate, so underhanded, that it left me reeling. The worst part was I wasn't even surprised. This was just another example of how far my family would go to get what they wanted, no matter who they had to trample over in the process. The lawyer explained that my parents were claiming Grandma had been mentally incompetent when she wrote the will. They were arguing that she had been manipulated by me into leaving everything to one person, which, of course, they said was completely out of character for her. They were trying to paint me as some kind of conniving villain who took advantage of a vulnerable old woman. It was disgusting. I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of fury and sadness. All I wanted was to honour Grandma's wishes and finally have something of my own. But my family was determined to drag me through the mud to get their way. And now I had to fight them in court. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into preparing for the legal battle ahead. I gathered all the evidence I could find to prove that Grandma had been in full control of her faculties when she wrote the will. I tracked down old letters, emails, and even a video we had taken together just a few months before her death, where she had talked about her decision to leave everything to me. She had been so clear, so rational, that it was impossible to argue she didn't know what she was doing. But every step of the way, my family found new ways to twist the knife. They started spreading rumours among extended family and friends, telling anyone who would listen that I had manipulated Grandma, that I was a money-grubbing leech who had taken advantage of a frail, confused old woman. They even started showing up at my apartment, banging on the door, demanding that I do the right thing and split the inheritance. One night, I came home to find my front door ajar. My heart raced as I stepped inside, half expecting to find the place ransacked. But everything seemed in order until I walked into the living room. There, on the coffee table, was a photo of Grandma and me, the glass frame shattered, and a note scrawled in my sister's handwriting. "This is what you deserve." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the couch, holding the broken frame in my hands, wondering how things had gotten so out of control. I had always known my family could be cruel, but this level of hatred and vitriol was something else entirely. It was like they had been waiting for an excuse to unleash all their pent-up resentment on me, and now they had found it. The court date loomed closer, and the tension was unbearable. My lawyer assured me we had a strong case, but I couldn't shake the fear that somehow my family would find a way to twist the truth, to paint me as the bad guy in all this. They had already convinced so many people that I was in the wrong. What if they convinced the judge too? The day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom, my heart pounding in my chest. My parents and siblings were already there, sitting together on one side of the room, casting cold, hateful glances in my direction. It was strange seeing them all lined up like that, united against me. It was a reminder of just how alone I was in this fight. The proceedings began, and the ugly accusations started flying. My parents' lawyer painted a picture of a frail, confused old woman who had been coerced by a greedy, selfish granddaughter. He brought out so-called witnesses, distant relatives and family friends who claimed they had seen signs of Grandma's supposed mental decline, who insisted that she would never have intentionally left everything to me. But when my lawyer presented our evidence, their case started to fall apart. The video of Grandma, clear-eyed and sharp as ever, talking about why she had made her decision, was a powerful blow to their argument. My lawyer also read aloud the letter Grandma had written me, explaining her reasons in detail, and it was clear that this was a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and why. As the hearing went on, I saw the confidence drain from my parents' faces. My brother, who had been glaring at me with pure hatred earlier, now looked down at his feet, avoiding eye contact. My sister, who had been dabbing at fake tears, was now fidgeting nervously, her bravado crumbling. But it wasn't over yet. When my mother took the stand, she put on the performance of a lifetime. She sobbed, she pleaded, she painted herself as a loving daughter who had only ever wanted the best for her mother, who had been heartbroken to see her manipulated in her final days. She even claimed that she and Grandma had been in the process of revising the will before she passed, but that I had intervened and prevented it. It was a total fabrication, and my lawyer tore it apart during cross-examination. But still, the damage was done. I could see the judge watching her with a frown, and I couldn't tell if he was buying her act or not. The hearing dragged on, and by the time it was over, I felt like I'd been through a war. We were told that the judge would make his decision in a few days, and I left the courtroom with my nerves in shreds, unsure of what the outcome would be. Those days were some of the longest of my life. I barely ate, barely slept, just sat by the phone waiting for the call that would decide my future. Would Grandma's wishes be honoured, or would my family manage to tear everything away from me? When the call finally came, I almost couldn't answer it. My hands were shaking so badly that I fumbled with the phone, nearly dropping it, but I forced myself to take a deep breath and press the button. My lawyer's voice came through, calm and steady. "We won." I didn't realise I was holding my breath until my lawyer said those words. We won. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I sagged into the nearest chair, my body trembling as the tension of the past weeks finally began to unravel. I couldn't believe it. After everything my family had put me through, Grandma's wishes were going to be honoured. "I'll send you the official paperwork," my lawyer continued, his voice a lifeline pulling me back to reality. "The judge ruled in our favour. Your family doesn't have a leg to stand on, and the will is valid as it stands. You don't owe them anything." I thanked him, my voice barely above a whisper, and ended the call. The victory was sweet, but it was also bittersweet. My family had fought so hard to take this away from me, and in doing so, they had revealed just how little they actually cared about me. All those years I had spent trying to gain their approval, to be part of the family, felt like a cruel joke. A few days later, I received a letter from my mother. I hesitated before opening it, not sure if I could handle another onslaught of accusations and demands. But curiosity got the better of me, and I finally unfolded the paper. The letter was surprisingly short. My mother wrote that she was disappointed in me, that she couldn't believe I would choose money over family, and that I had betrayed them all. She ended by saying that, as far as she was concerned, I was no longer her daughter. I stared at the letter for a long time, feeling a strange sense of detachment. There was no anger, no sorrow, just a profound emptiness. I had lost my family long before this inheritance debacle. All this letter did was make it official. A part of me wanted to respond, to explain that I hadn't chosen money over family. I had chosen to honour the one person who had ever truly loved me, who had seen me for who I was and valued me. But I knew it was pointless. They would never understand, and I was done trying to make them see me. Instead, I took the letter, along with all the other nasty messages they had sent, and tossed them into the fireplace. I watched as the flames consumed the paper, turning it into ash. It felt symbolic, a cleansing of sorts, a way to let go of the past and everything that had come with it. With the legal battle behind me, I was finally free to think about the future. For the first time in my life, I had the resources to build something of my own, something that wasn't defined by my family's expectations or demands. I could move away, start fresh in a place where no one knew me, where I wasn't the scapegoat or the black sheep. I sold Grandma's house, knowing that living there would only keep me tethered to the memories of a life I was trying to leave behind. I found a cozy place in a small town several hours away, a place where I could blend in, where no one would look at me with the baggage of the past. As I settled into my new home, I felt lighter than I had in years. There were no more tense family dinners, no more walking on eggshells, no more being the target of their frustrations. I could breathe. But it wasn't just the physical distance that made the difference. It was the emotional distance, the realization that I didn't need their approval to be happy. For so long, I had been chasing something that was never going to be mine, trying to fit into a family that had never really wanted me. Letting go of that need was liberating. In the months that followed, I started to rebuild my life. I invested some of the inheritance into a small business I had always dreamed of starting, something that brought me joy and gave me purpose. I made new friends, people who knew me for who I was, not who my family had tried to convince me I was. And yet, despite everything, there were moments when the old wounds ached. I'd see a happy family in the park, laughing together, and I'd feel a pang of envy, a longing for something I had never truly had. But those moments grew fewer and farther between as I built a new sense of belonging, one that wasn't tied to blood or obligation. Then, one day, out of the blue, I received an email from my sister. It was short, just a few lines, but it was enough to stir up all the old emotions. She wrote that she missed me, that she wished things hadn't turned out the way they had, and that maybe we could talk. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what she and the rest of the family had put me through, just a vague olive branch, as if she was testing the waters. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to respond, to see if there was a chance for reconciliation. But another part of me, the part that had spent so many years being hurt by these people, knew better. I had given them chance after chance, and they had shown me who they really were. In the end, I didn't reply. I couldn't risk reopening old wounds, not when I had finally started to heal. Instead, I closed the laptop, went outside, and took a deep breath of the fresh, crisp air. I had a life to live, one that didn't revolve around their drama, their toxicity. I wasn't the scapegoat anymore. I wasn't their punching bag. I was free. Thank you for following my story. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic family members? How did you move on? Let me know in the comments below.